My name's Daniel Lloyd, I'm 26 years old and our landlord has proposed to increase our rent by 27%.
My name's Dave Chorner, I'm 33 and our rent went up 26%.
Housing is in the top 5 biggest election issues according to pollsters.
They want us to live in hell, that's what it is. They want us to live in misery.
2024 has seen UK house prices seemingly defy gravity, with prices rising close to an all-time peak.
My flatmate and I wouldn't be able to afford that increase based on the jobs we have and what we currently earn.
A generation of young people may never be able to own their own homes because of a grave housing crisis.
This is London, the capital of UK, and this is UK, one of the most developed country in the entire world, and something very scary is happening here.
This is showing you home ownership by generation. You can see, look, people born in the 50s, the 40s, the 60s, as they get older, they get more home ownership, so more people owning their homes as they get older. You can see in their ages there. But look what happens now when you're talking about kind of millennials and you're talking about those born in the 80s, those born in the 90s, it's not going up so quickly. So they're not able to get on the housing ladder quite so quickly. That's a big issue.
There is a big generational divide, or generational inequality, happening here.
In 2017, 35% of 25 to 34-year-olds were homeowners compared with 55% in 1997. In 2022, just 10% of homeowners in England were aged under 35.
Imagine this. In 2000, the average house in the UK cost just over £80,000. Fast forward to 2024, and that same house is now a staggering £290,000. That's a 260% increase. But here's the kicker. Average wages during that time, they've barely doubled from £17,000 to around £33,000. The result? A generation locked out of the housing market. But how did we get here? Is it just bad luck? Or has something gone deeply wrong with the UK's housing system? Rent is like a total nightmare.
How do people who can't afford their rent anymore sleep? They have to rough sleep. That's why we have cardboard, mattresses, the kind of stuff that people have to sleep on once they can't afford the rent anymore.
You were trying to look your best, but this time was hell. It was absolute hell.
Skyrocketing house prices in the UK are the result of a perfect storm of historical, economic, and social factors. Over the past 3 decades, house prices have surged over 260%, far outpacing wages and inflation.
I am so excited to buy this house that I can definitely afford. So this is the house, huh? I don't think we can afford it, but I guess we can try.
This trend has been fueled by foreign investment, especially in cities like London, where nearly 40% of new homes are bought by overseas investors, driving prices beyond the reach of local buyers.
There are big blocks of flats and so on, well-known ones, where you look at there in the evenings and there are no lights on, or maybe there's one light on. And so very obviously there, people aren't really living there.
So this home owned by an Italian lady who basically lives in Italy and uses this as a secondary home.
Demand has also surged, driven by a growing population and urbanization, while housing supply has lagged far behind. Government schemes like Help to Buy, aimed at boosting homeownership, have instead intensified the problem by injecting demand into an already strained market. Ultimately, the imbalance between supply and demand has made housing increasingly unaffordable for the average person in the UK. The UK needs 300,000 new homes annually, but has built fewer than 200,000 per year over the past decade, leaving a shortfall of over 1 million homes. Developers often focus on high-profit luxury homes over affordable housing, leaving cities like London with empty upscale apartments while families struggle to find starter homes. Rising construction costs and labor shortages further complicate building efforts. This nationwide supply shortage drives up prices, making homes increasingly unaffordable. Without addressing these barriers, the UK's housing crisis will continue to worsen. Saving for a deposit is tough, but rising interest rates have made mortgages an even bigger challenge for prospective UK homeowners. In 2021, the average fixed-rate mortgage was just over 2%. By 2024, it soared to over 6%. For example, on a £250,000 home with a 10% deposit, a mortgage at 2% cost about £950 a month. At 6%, that payment skyrockets to over £1,500, a 60% increase. This rise in borrowing costs has added hundreds of pounds to monthly budgets, making home ownership even less affordable. The key driver? The Bank of England's response to inflation. Over 2 years, it raised the base rate from 0.1% to over 5%, directly impacting mortgage rates. While this aims to cool inflation, it has priced many buyers out of the market. First-time buyers now face average mortgage rates of 6.1%, up from 2.2% in 2021. Homeownership is increasingly out of reach, not just due to rising house prices, but because affording a mortgage has become a long-term financial strain in today's high-interest environment. The rising cost of living worsens the problem.
I've not had anything to eat since breakfast. I've got no money to get any food or get any drink. It really hit me now how bad things really are.
Energy bills, food, and transport eat into disposable income, leaving little to save for deposits.
UK inflation has hit its highest level in almost 30 years. The soaring food costs and the energy crisis drive up prices.
Ofgem has announced the new price cap for an average fuel bill will rise £700.
Many are forced to rent, often paying more than they would on a mortgage.
In some flats, we're having their rent increased by £100 per person. That prompted us to knock around and gather people's numbers, get a group chat together on WhatsApp to discuss our rent situations. And it was there that we found out that people were facing increases in excess of 25%, some as much as 30%.
Many people here in London are feeling overwhelmed with the task of finding a new home. Properties are disappearing from real estate websites within hours, so people need to react to new listings immediately. Scrolling through online property listings, you might find flats advertised for 2 people, but with bunk beds, or rooms so small the door doesn't fully open before hitting the bed frame.
Generational inequality is stark. Older homeowners have seen their wealth grow as property values skyrocketed.
This is my property in Doncaster. This property is worth about 200,000 and I rent it for 1,200 a month. This is my seaside cottage in Filey. This is about 400,000 and we run it as a holiday let and it probably brings in about 4,000 to 5,000 a month. That's turnover. This is Bellsfield Cottage in Windermere. This property is going to do about 90 grand this year. The top property, that's in Cumbria. That's called Redmayne House. Again, that's a massive holiday let, 9 bed. That's going to turn over about £168,000. So it's buy to let, but where property prices are low, rents are high, serviced accommodation, splash out, because that's £1 million property up there.
While younger generations are locked out of the market entirely. Without meaningful wage growth or more affordable housing, this gap will continue to widen, leaving homeownership a distant dream for millions. Government policies aimed at addressing the UK housing crisis often exacerbate the very problems they seek to solve. Take the Help to Buy scheme. Introduced in 2013, it offered government-backed loans to first-time buyers. While well-intentioned, it fueled demand in an undersupplied market, pushing house prices higher. A 2022 report revealed that over 60% of participants could have bought homes without it, suggesting the scheme inflated prices more than it improved affordability. For years, tax incentives encouraged landlords to buy properties as investments, driving up prices and reducing availability for owner-occupiers. By 2024, landlords owned 15% of England's housing stock, limiting options for ordinary buyers despite recent tax reforms. Despite ambitious housing targets, these goals are often unmet due to local opposition, poor implementation, and funding shortfalls for affordable housing. Developers frequently exploit loopholes to avoid building affordable units, worsening supply issues. Stamp duty reductions, intended to make home buying cheaper, have also backfired. These policies temporarily boost demand, raising prices, and benefiting existing homeowners more than first-time buyers. The core issue is a lack of a coherent, long-term strategy. Successive governments have focused on piecemeal measures like planning reform and minor incentives, without addressing systemic problems such as land availability and the need for public housing projects. Critics argue that these policies cater to existing homeowners, a key voter base, while neglecting younger generations locked out of the market. To To truly solve the crisis, the government must adopt bold, transformative measures like large-scale public housing investments and stricter planning reforms. The current approach isn't working. The UK's housing crisis is more than an economic issue. It's reshaping society and deepening inequalities. For younger generations, homeownership is increasingly out of reach.
Rent in Manchester is now so expensive that students like Ella have had to leave the city. She now has a long commute from the other side of Liverpool.
The bus takes about 40 minutes to Liverpool, and then from Liverpool it would take an hour or hour and 20 minutes to Manchester. But then coming home, it can take me like 3 hours to get home. So yeah, it's quite draining.
Only 28% of 25 to 34-year-olds own a home today, compared to 55% in the late 1990s. Many are trapped in the private rental market, paying higher rents than a mortgage would cost. This has created a generation of renters unable to put down roots or plan for the future.
Half of baby boomers own their own home by the age of 30. For millennials, it's 30%. It's not because millennials are spending all their money on cappuccinos or Netflix. It's just one basic statistic. 40 years ago, the average home cost 3 times the average salary. It's now 8.5 times the average salary. Now, it just housing costs. You spend far more as a percentage of your income, even if you're a private renter. And one of the reasons for that is, take Right to Buy. Lots of homes were flogged off but not replaced. 40% of the council homes that got flogged off under Right to Buy are now let out by buy-to-let landlords, and they're charging twice the rent. So if you're a millennial, you don't get council housing, don't even think about it, you'll be stuck on a waiting list until you're probably actually in your retirement. You can't get a home often because house prices are so expensive. But the other thing is the private rented sector is a rip-off. You're paying huge amounts of your wage packet on private rents.
Yeah. The rents are going up a lot. As a landlord, how do you justify those rents going up?
Well, I think people tend to think have a view that landlords are cashing in on rents going up, but of course there's a lot of different factors in there. It's a risk like any business really, isn't it? You're investing a lot of money, taking a lot of debt on your head, and of course you've then got those liabilities, so there's a lot of different aspects to take into account.
Regional disparities compound the issue. Sky-high house prices in cities like London push workers to the outskirts, forcing long commutes, while low-income families in struggling regions face stagnant wages that make even modest homes unaffordable. Social mobility is another victim. Homeownership increasingly relies on parental financial help, widening the wealth gap and making financial independence a distant dream for many. The psychological toll is significant, with rising stress and frustration as people feel locked out of stability and opportunity. The crisis has also fueled homelessness and forced families into overcrowded or substandard housing.
Soaring energy bills and rents have left Melody sleeping on friends' sofas. She has given up looking for a home, saying it became a choice between her law degree or spending more time on pointless house hunting.
I've had places where I've said, can I have your next available viewing? And they called me in 5 minutes, oh, it's gone. Sometimes I've also had when landlords have said, can you submit an essay, tell me about yourself? Can you pay more than this person? So they're saying 1,700, can you say 1,800? And it's a bit of a bidding war. And it's honestly, you just don't know where you're gonna.
It's no longer just about housing. It's about fairness, opportunity, and the UK's future. Without bold action, the ripple effects will continue to divide society. The UK's housing crisis is daunting, but not beyond repair. Bold, systemic changes could address the root causes and provide lasting solutions. Boosting affordable housing is key. Increased government funding for social housing and stricter requirements for developers to include affordable homes in projects are essential. For example, the Netherlands reserves over 30% of housing stock for social use, a model the UK could adopt by revitalizing council housing programs, which have plummeted since the 1980s. Policies like higher taxes on empty homes, stricter rules for overseas buyers, and stamp duty reform could deter property hoarding and shift the focus to homes for ordinary buyers. Rent controls could protect tenants from excessive rent hikes. Addressing the construction skills gap is critical. Finally, the government must commit to a long-term housing strategy. Housing policy in the UK has often been piecemeal and politically driven. A comprehensive, strategic approach focusing on affordability and accessibility could reverse decades of neglect. A combination of these measures could tackle the housing crisis but only if there's decisive, sustained action. Without it, the divide between those who can afford a home and those who can't will only grow. The UK housing crisis isn't just about rising prices or stagnant wages. It's a reflection of a system that has failed to adapt to the needs of its people. But crises don't last forever. With the right policies, investment, and collaboration, the dream of owning a home doesn't have to be out of reach for future generations. What do you think? Can this crisis be solved, or are we heading toward an even bigger housing disaster?
We just can't afford the payments. Full stop.